Welcome to Electric Evolution with Liz Allan. This podcast explores the transition to net zero and the systems driving real change in how we move, live and power our world. Every week I sit down with the people leading that change, those offering insight, innovation and impact in many ways people don't fully see until they hear their stories. If you're ready for real conversations that inspire action and drive change, please like this video, subscribe to the channel and join us on this journey. And let's cut through the noise and build a better future together. So on today's episode, I have a wonderful person who's been on the podcast before. I have Niall Riddell, not Niall Riddell or Niall Riddell or anything like that. It's Niall Riddell from Paua.
That's me.
There you are. And he's the founder and the CEO. If you've not seen him, oh my God, he was on so early on in the podcast, weren't you? And we told dad jokes.
Yeah, we did. We did
well,
some
you
good dad
did,
jokes.
because I'm not a dad, but you know what I mean.
I'm still doing animal jokes as a way to engage with some of my prospects. It seems to work.
I love that. I love that. So let's start off. And I've had you on and I've had Pam Hanlon on and she was amazing. I love her to bits. But let's just do so for those people who are watching and listening who don't know very much or anything at all about Paua. Tell us a little bit about you.
Cool. Hello, my name's Neil. I spent 15 years in large energy utilities. I did EDF and SSE and before that a bit of time with British Energy and RWE. And about, 5 years ago now, realised that if I really wanted to make a difference, I probably should go and do it on my own. So we set up a business, Paua, back in 2020 during the middle of COVID. And that enables drivers to find, charge and pay on public chargers. But more recently, we spent a lot of time doing things like home energy reimbursement, so you can get fairly reimbursed when charging at home. And then we've recently enabled the ability to share chargers, so a private site can share their chargers with another business. So we're busy, trying to make it easier and easier for more people to get in more electric cars faster.
And you're really innovative as well, aren't you? You know,
try to be.
And because you've got a good team, quite small, but you're quite agile as well, so you're able to kind of, move and shape the business to what the market is wanting, aren't you?
Yeah, so we spend a lot of time speaking to customers, basically. Some of them give us a long list of things we're supposed to be doing, so we try and do as many of them as possible. And one of the great conversations I had recently was with Jamie Sands on electric HGVs. And he's like, Neil, what we need is just a bunch of pins on a map that show me where I can charge my HGV. So that's part of kind of what we're doing, putting pins on maps.
And that's great, because everybody needs to know where the chargers are. You're predominantly kind of business, aren't you? So you're B2B yes. rather than B2C.
Yeah, lots of commercial vehicle drivers, so that's why the truck thing's very interesting to us, because we've got cars and vans, they fit in a regular charging bay. You've then got your sort of medium-sized sprinters, your rigid vehicles, they can fit into our medium bays. And then we've got this large category for the EHGVs, so splitting out that range of commercial vehicles, all of who are going electric, is really important when we're helping them find, charge and pay.
That is, actually finding out about all of the EHGVs that are coming on the market and the need for charging for them, like you say, having to think ahead and make sure you're future-proofing for when you're getting more, there's more on the roads. So it is really, really interesting. But I was going to talk about the fact that, so a couple of months back, we were both on a panel at Move, weren't we, at the Excel? And it was my first panel session, so I was slightly nervous, I can say that, but
it went well. It went well.
Yeah, it was a good panel. But we were talking about a thing called interoperability. I tried to say that before, didn't I? And I didn't manage it before we were talking, but I managed it just then. and it's something that people have got different opinions about and different knowledge. Different areas of knowledge. So when I remember talking to you about interoperability and also talking to a couple of other people about it, and everybody's opinion on interoperability was very different. Can you start off, because we're going to talk about a number of your unpopular opinions, which I love, but actually, let's start. Can you just explain a little bit about what interoperability is?
Yeah, so there's 2 or 3 ways to think about interoperability. And we had a long panel session on interoperability, and towards the end of it, the conclusion was it's when charging just works. And that's kind of the consumer outcome that we're looking to get to. The driver outcome is it just works. I can go anywhere, charge anywhere, understand it. The price is obvious, and I'm aware of it. The reality is that when we look at this from a more technical standpoint, what we're basically looking at is about 120 different charge point operators in the UK. Mm-hmm. So that's 120 brands, 120 different ways of presenting the asset to the customer, 120 different software platforms potentially behind them, and it's a layer of complexity that we don't need.
Yeah.
So as a consequence, a lot of what we think about with interoperability is making that problem, that complexity, go away. So sometimes we say that our job is to take all the complexity and push it into the background so the consumer doesn't see any of that. And therefore, interoperability is really about making the consumer experience easier. But what it means from a technical standpoint depends on what role you have in the industry. So you remember we sat next to Rebecca from GridServe, and a lot of her thinking on interoperability was, will this car work with this charger?
Yep.
And it's that physical interoperability between the car and the charger. A lot of my interoperability question is, how do I create a common experience for a driver on a GridServe charger, an Instavolt charger, and an Osprey charger? So how do I create a common harmonious layer of data and information and price so they can see that experience and have that experience in a more unified manner? So a huge amount of interoperability depends on where you're sat. But once you unpick it, there's lots of technical detail. Once you unpick it for the consumer, just make charging work.
Yeah, but and like you say, from those different angles, as you say, if people don't understand about charging itself, there are lots of layers to it, aren't there? Some people come in from a hardware point of view, so the actual charger itself, and then you've got the software inside it, so you've got the back office systems, you've got the payment systems, haven't you?
You've got firmware on the actual physical charger, so you've got layers, an onion peeled layer of software that's sat inside this ecosystem, and ultimately the consumer doesn't care and shouldn't care. But we've got to create that experience which is simple, harmonised, and accessible for everybody.
And the other thing was as well, it's the vehicle as well, isn't it? It's whether some vehicles can't, and people don't always know this, some vehicles can't always talk to the chargers. Yep.
That was one of my favourite experiences. We did the GB EV rally in 2022, and we drove around the north coast of Scotland. And of course, people have brought out their nice fancy cars. So we had a couple of Jaguar I-Paces, a couple of Mustangs. We took them along the north coast of Scotland on what was a relatively old, historically built network. And sometimes the car and the charger just didn't speak to each other. And it's constant upgrades. The technology is moving all the time, so we've got to keep all of these things upgraded so that everything works. But sometimes it doesn't.
And that's kind of the concern, isn't it? And like you said, it's about removing the barriers to make sure that driver plugging in doesn't know. And it's funny because the common theme of everybody that I've been talking to lately, or a lot of people I've been talking to, is just about it being it just works, seamless. You shouldn't have to actually think about it. Boring. It's not something that, because I was talking to Dev Channa from Eon Drive Infrastructure, the first face-to-face podcast I did, which is brilliant. But he was just kind of saying, because he was basically saying, what do you? I said to him, what would you want people to be able to say about your charging infrastructure? And he said, it just works, just like you said. And he said, it just needs to be boring. People, because I was talking about the fact that I'd rung my husband to say that I got over 200 miles on our Ioniq that day. Do you know what I mean? And it was just, and he said, people are still excited about getting, different experiences and things like that. But at some point, it is going to be just like going to, I don't want to say going to a petrol station, because they're not the same, are they? They're stinking horrible.
The idea is that most consumers or most drivers want to go from A to B. They might be doing a job, or they might be visiting their in-laws, whatever it is. They're going from A to B. They don't really care about that experience in the middle. As long as it's not horribly wrong, they're happy just to go with it. So, one of the things I always found fascinating was Instavolt's presented itself very much from the early days of a very simple story. It's a charger. It works. You can use multiple ways to pay for it, depending on how you want to pay for it. It's almost always the same price every place you go. It just works. And that very basic hygiene level, if we can meet that across the industry, everyone will be happy. And I think then you can start getting all the sophisticated stuff with reservations and pricing and all the other cool stuff that comes with it. But at the beginning, let's just make it work.
Right, so do you want to throw in a few of your unpopular opinions then? Shall we start on that one?
I recently presented 8 unpopular opinions in an event for another corporation in this space, and some of them raised some eyebrows. I think one of the ones that I'm very, very aware of at the moment is this idea, and sorry if this sounds like a GCSE economics lesson, we have a supply and demand issue in our market. So when it comes to public charges, you quite often get people going, there's not enough public charges. I'd actually argue the contrary. I think we've built too many public charges
so far.
Yeah, and it's constant evolution between where we are in the industry and where we've got to get to. But we've probably overbuilt the number of charges today for the number of vehicles on the road. And this is, fairly simple economics. You need to make a return on investment. You put some cash in the ground, your business model goes underwater, you get some revenue flowing through that asset, and hey presto, you make money on the other side. Most of the businesses that do that will do a nice little spreadsheet calculation. They'll work out they need a certain number of charging sessions a day. When I did it in the past, it was 6 to 8. So you need 6 to 8, 20-ish kilowatt hour sessions, and you fix a price. That means you get a return on investment on your asset. I think from our data, we're probably seeing about 3 or maybe even less sessions per day on rapid, high-powered chargers. So that means they're all losing money. If they're all losing money, it's because there's not enough charging sessions happening. If there's not enough charging sessions happening, it's probably because there's not enough vehicles. So I think we're in a territory whereby there are some sites that are incredibly well utilised. I always point at the ESB charger in St James's Square in central London. Probably got one of the highest utilisations of all the chargers I'm aware of. But motorway service areas, they get a lot of use. But there are other sites which are a bit more out of town, perhaps in a smaller town or more urban environment, less urban environment, which probably don't see those numbers. So my current view is that we've probably got too many public chargers in the UK for the number of vehicles we've got on the road. Now that will correct itself over time, but it also means that it's a tricky balancing point for operators who are trying to make a return on investment.
I've got a question for you then. So, well, it's 2 questions. A, does that mean that the charger that you're talking about in the more rural area has been put in the wrong place? Or B, and B should I say, are you seeing certain, and I know you can't say who, and I would never ask you to say who, certain networks not gaining traction or utilisation, therefore return on investment, because of the experience that they're providing? Like you've just said, InstaVolt just works. But we know that not all chargers and not all networks are the same. So would you, I know that's kind of like a two-pronged question. So rural chargers, were they put in the wrong place in the first place? Or maybe the wrong speed in the right place?
Have we made some mistakes is perhaps the question. And I think the answer is easy. Yes, we've made some mistakes. Have we learned from those mistakes? Yes, I think generally we have. So a lot of more recently installed infrastructure is meeting the expectations of what people want. I'm very nervous about the rural debate because I always use the railways as an example here. There's only actually one railway line in this country which makes money, and that's the North East Main Line. The line up towards Manchester is about break even. Pretty much every other railway line in this country loses money. Okay. So as a consequence, we know that certain forms of transport need some form of public support. We also know that things like motorways and motorway chargers are used quite heavily because people are doing longer distances, doing longer trips, they pop in, they charge, and they move on again. So I think there's quite a strong differential between a charger located on the north coast of Scotland and a charger located on the M6. Your M6 charger is going to see traffic, a lot of traffic. Your North Coast Scotland charger will probably see traffic in the summer when people are doing the NC 500 and stuff, but realistically, it's probably going to get pretty low utilisation. And therefore, we have to applaud what Charge Place Scotland did by putting that network of chargers in to support rural drivers. And they're not always the best. They are quite old, and they need some work. But realistically, we need some consideration for placing some additional cash into more rural areas. One of my other unpopular opinions is we're regulated as an industry now, and we're regulated because we failed. We failed to meet the expectations of government and OZEV, and therefore they turned around and regulated us. But I always counter, and for me it's a very personal failure, because a big thing they wanted to do was get interoperability working, and we just haven't gone fast enough. So we become regulated. I counter that by saying there's a fabulous quote, which is a Reagan quote, Reaganomics. If it moves, tax it. If it keeps moving, regulate it. And if it stops moving, subsidise it. And I do feel like rural chargers are probably going to sit in that subsidy arena. It's difficult to justify as a private business the investment in a very rural location when it's probably not going to see the charging sessions. So if we get it wrong, we're going to have like a two-speed adoption. We're going to get the urban areas, the motorways, going to get, boom, loads of infrastructure, lots of power going into them. But the urban areas, think Central Wales, think North Yorkshire, those parts of the world are going to see less infrastructure. And if they see less infrastructure, there'll be less adoption. So I think it's a real thinking point in there around how we support more rural chargers, more rural locations.
And that's just demonstrating it's chicken and egg, isn't it? Kind of, it's not easy. I mean, I know Laura, who works with you at Paua. She lives in North Yorkshire, doesn't she?
Yep.
And
we talked about this morning.
Sorry.
There's no chargers near her.
No, exactly.
She literally is living in a charging desert.
Yeah.
We're bringing on another network partner at the moment, and it's predominantly down in the southwest, southeast. And suddenly you go, well, great, more chargers, but it doesn't help anyone who's living in North Yorkshire.
So what? I don't know whether you can answer this question. What would entice a network to actually go to a rural area? Because depending on where it is, depends. I know it's footfall. I get it. I totally get that. But at some point, has it got to be government intervention in order to force that to happen?
Maybe not. If I was going to make the maybe not argument, what I would argue is that we need investors with perhaps more of a longer term mindset. If you think long term as an investor and you go, right, this transition's happening, it's going to take 5 or 10 years, but I want to secure the best sites in every small town in the UK, you could quite quickly see there's a really strong investment strategy to go, you know what, I'm going to go and find the best site in the town hall car park in every town or village of a population of 10,000 to 25,000. That right there is a straightforward investment strategy. You're probably going to see low utilisation, but you will be the go-to charger location in each of those towns across the country. And in many ways, that's what Genie Point did. They had a network of chargers that spanned the country, and the number of my customers who were like, oh yeah, just done my first charge, it was at Genie Point. Because they had a very thin, wide, nationwide coverage. I think that's actually a really smart move, because you can then adapt your growth. You've secured your site, and when we've probably less so now, but we have been in a race to secure the best sites. When you think about it in that way, and you go, actually, I've got a 10 or a 15 year return horizon. Actually, having those best sites is probably a really good idea. So that there is an argument there to say secure those really high quality sites in more rural areas now, but expect a longer period of return. But ultimately, I think many of the private investors that are coming into the market to build this new asset class don't have that longevity.
No.
We've gone through a period of VC investment. We've seen some private equity come in, and more recently, we know that a bunch of companies have started to secure debt for charging, which is great. This is an indication of the financial health of the industry as we move from risk-based capital to lower risk-based capital. So it's great to see, but I also don't think you'll get secure debt to build chargers on the north coast of Scotland. So I think there's a challenge there that the kind of financing that's coming in probably won't support that unless there's some form of part subsidy or full subsidy to secure certain locations.
So wouldn't it be easier? I'm not saying easier. So we're talking about these little small towns and villages in rural areas, and we know that, say, like Suffolk County Council have got various locations like that, and they've managed to do it, haven't they? But would we be talking about kind of utilising lower 7 kilowatt charge, some kind of destination charging, just because in my mind we know how expensive high power chargers are. So you're ultra rapid, we know that they're really expensive, so that's an asset that it costs a pretty penny to install, isn't it? But I mean, if you're actually looking at kind of like some small destination chargers, I know, yes, it's still investment, but I'm not saying it's lower risk, and it would still be a long-term return, but at least you're showing willing, as the phrase goes. Do you know what I mean?
It's definitely a starting point, and there's a couple of things I want to raise in there. One is, I think we do have a variance across local authorities as to how forward-thinking they are. And you pick Suffolk. Matthew Ling and the team over there are doing an incredible job. They are very forward-thinking. They're pushing the boundary of what they're doing. And there's a bunch of others like Ryan Robertson up in East Lothian, Paul over in Oxfordshire. The guys around Coventry, Shamala, I think it is. There's a couple of local authorities that are really pushing ahead, and there are others that are perhaps still on the journey and trying to understand it. So, from a local authority perspective, we've got a divergence of speeds, and Levi will do a lot towards supporting more capability in some of those local authorities. But I just wish they matchmate their experiences a bit more. Find your neighbouring county who's not doing such a good job, partner up, share your learning, see if you can't boost their capability as well.
Some of them do. Some of them are kind of helping one another. I mean, I've been talking to somebody locally in Berkshire recently, and I've kind of put her in contact with somebody that I've been working with. So Gemma Robinson from High Trans up in Scotland. So I've been doing some work with those. And we're coming out the other side with a load of lessons learned. So I've put this lady in touch with Gemma, because I know,
share that knowledge.
And I know Oxford do it as well. Lots of local authorities have been speaking to Oxford and Suffolk. So it is about that, like you say. It is about that knowledge, that level of knowledge sharing, and actually being able to support one another with that. Because I know it's not easy, but like you were saying earlier on, it has been very much of a land grab, hasn't it?
Yeah, the land grab has happened, but I think the other side of this that I'm really fascinated about is price. We have developed a bad habit as an industry of talking about price in the wrong kind of way. So we quite often go, I can charge at home for 7p. Yeah. Why should I pay 70p when I'm out in public? And what I try and remind people of is they're not comparing the same thing.
No.
They're comparing their marginal electricity cost at home with the total cost of charging in public. And that's not fair. It's not an appropriate comparison.
There's so many layers to that as well, isn't there?
And that unpicking those layers starts to go, well, actually, when you use a public charger, it's fully insured. It's entirely yours at the time. You're paying back, for the asset itself. You've got the bay. Often you've got lighting and amenities and all that sort of stuff around it. And by the way, it's high powered a lot of the time, which you're not going to get at home. So you're paying for a little bit more. And at home, people forget that they paid for the charger. They paid for the installation. They had the benefit of a grid connection and a driveway, because they wouldn't have a home charger without a driveway. So there's a bunch of other characteristics that they just forget about conveniently when they go 7p versus 70p. The reality is that over time, I think we're going to see some real fun happening on that total cost of charging, because that's where the fun and games begins. But if we don't compare apples with apples, then we're going to make a mistake from the start. And I think it's important that when public charge point operators talk about their costs, they should explain that obviously they're doing all of this service, 24/7 call centres, ops and maintenance, all of that stuff you get included in the price. Whereas when you think about your home charger, have you ever called out an electrician to fix your home charge point? I got quoted £165. I was like, wow. In the end, I replaced the charger rather than get it fixed.
Yeah.
But you suddenly go, well, hang on. When you put that maths together and you do the economist, the GCSE economist view of what the total cost is, suddenly the 7p at home is no longer 7p. It's more like 50p.
Fair enough. I'm going to ask you a provocative question now, because I know that I've got thoughts on it. and I know we've kind of gone away from the interoperability conversation, haven't we? But I think this is something that's interesting, and I know that you'll be honest with it, about it. What are your thoughts on VAT on public charging?
Okay.
Are you going to hate me You're going to hate me for asking that, aren't you? I know.
I'm not going to hate you. So let's start this properly by saying I'm not a tax advisor, so this isn't tax advice.
No. This is just these.
Yeah.
Please don't quote us, everybody. These are just our opinions.
Our opinions, informed opinions. I've spoken to a number of very capable financial advisors on this topic. So some of the guys in the Big Four around what's actually going on here. If you can be bothered to read the regulation on this topic, it's surprisingly clear that you can get away with charging 5% on a public charge point. The guidance that has been published by HMRC appears to indicate the exact opposite. But at the end of the day, the law is the regulation, not the guidance. So if you're prepared to take the time and effort, it's possible that someone at some point will either go through a formal legal challenge with HMRC or just choose to charge 5%. So there is an option in there for charge point operators to review, and please do go get formal advice before you do this, to look at the 5% route. And I think it will probably take some case law to actually move us into that scenario, because I don't see government budging on the 20% at the moment. I think it's too easy for them. It's also, when you put it in the scheme of tax, it's not a particularly big issue for them. So where do I stand on it? I'm very much in the view that it's the 5% is something that could be done, but it's something that I think someone will have to take a certain amount of financial risk on in order to prove that point. And so far, I'm not aware of anyone having done that in a public stance. So it's one to watch. I think the secondary consideration to all of this is we often talk about the 5%, 20% in the sense of it's unfair. I pay 5% at home, but I have to pay 20% on the road. You've also got to remember that home energy bill includes a whole load of other stuff that's not VAT, like the various levies and grants that support energy efficiency at home. So the warm home discount, Eco and CERT and CESP and whatever all those home energy measures are, they're all sat inside that home energy bill. So we've got to be careful that we don't suddenly turn around and go, it's unfair. The people who charge in public don't pay for these home energy grants. And you could argue, well, it's a levy at home because it's for home energy, but there are other factors that make up the electricity price that perhaps need to be considered as we look at pricing on networks.
Okay.
I know we could geek out on the components of electricity price for a long time.
No, that's, and because you've worked in the energy industry before, it makes sense for you to have these conversations. I'm going to just throw something out there that I've that's been bothering me for a little while, and I didn't know about this potential 5%, so that would be really, really interesting to see if any networks
anyone does it
do challenge it, especially because there are some big players attached to energy giants, so that would make sense for them to kind of follow that route. My question and thoughts on VAT are, and I can imagine somebody's going to be puffing, going, oh my God, when we get to the point, say at 2030, when we're at 8, we've sold or OEMs are selling 80%, of electric, and it's going to take a long time for the UK to transition everybody over. But as we move over, and as people are driving, I bet you know what I'm going to say here, don't you? As people are driving petrol and diesel cars less, so we've got, I'm waving my hands around if you're not watching. Yeah.
So we've got an imbalance.
Yeah. So as petrol and diesel numbers come down, and electric goes up, that means that all of that fuel duty and all of that taxation that's put on kind of petrol and diesel, petrol stations, etc. I don't know how it all works. That is going to affect the government, isn't it? My concern, and I probably shouldn't even be saying this out loud, really, my concern is what will the government do then? because they'll want the money from somewhere.
Yeah. So fuel duties and fuel levies are a huge part of government's tax take. And if you break it down, I can't even remember the exact numbers, but a very significant chunk, more than 20% of the cost of a litre of petrol or diesel is levies. So as a consequence, when you've broken that down, you're like, well, hang on, how do we replace that going forward? That's kind of like the elephant in the room. I think the one thing that has been going through my head for quite a while now is there are perhaps more sophisticated ways to consider how we would tax the use of vehicles. We know that congestion is a problem in this country. We've got a lot of people living in a small area. Our population density is twice that of France. It's really got, we're half the land area, similar sized population. So, we do have a lot of people, particularly in, down in the south of England, where we're all on the roads at the same time. I have this idea, and I have no idea whether anyone will ever execute it, but getting really high quality road pricing is probably where we'll go. The long-term vision might look something like this: occupancy based, time of day based, road based, perhaps weight of vehicle based. To reflect all of the characteristics associated with if you're driving your Range Rover Discovery with one person on the morning commute on the M25, should you pay more than someone in a Renault Twizy, probably not on the M25, but a smaller car which has got 3 people in it because you're car sharing. And do you pay less if actually you travel not at 9 o'clock in the morning but at 6 o'clock in the morning? That sort of sophistication is entirely possible. I know you and I talk about V to X as an energy vector, but actually V to X in the car world is the vehicle communicating with infrastructure around it. I could see a rise in V to X, telematics, connected car, to enable us to go, actually, you know what, you were on the M25 at 9 o'clock this morning, you're going to pay £1 a mile, I don't know, whatever it is. And you can see that dynamic shifting, and I think we're starting to see elements of that, road and time-based pricing emerging in different segments. So it's not beyond the wit of man to deliver that, but I suspect that's where we're more likely to go, rather than trying to put all the price on fuel.
And when I get you, and that would be a long-term aim, wouldn't it, to solve, because we do need to reduce the number of vehicles on the road and things
or use the vehicles on the road more efficiently. Rather than 3 cars, have 1 car. It's those sorts of things. It's like, actually, how do we incentivise that behaviour? And money's a great incentiviser.
And I suppose if you think about kind of future cities and things like that, where they've, you talk about people not actually owning a car, but just having a car as and when you need it. I mean, the number of times that our cars start on the drive.
An autonomous car. A high utilised autonomous car. And actually, by the way, a shared vehicle doing common routes against demand. There's some just fabulous science fiction type, concepts emerging already. We're well off topic now, but you can see how we would basically create a digitised layer that says, "Hey, I'm Neil. I want to go to Westminster." Great, Neil. There's a pod going to be down the road in about 10 minutes. Can you go over here and pick it up? Kind of Uber style, pick up points. But the pod comes in. There's no driver, so the marginal cost to run it's quite low. There's 3 other people who are all going on a route into Westminster, and we all jump out at the relevant points. And that tech exists today. And with the autonomous bill coming into full force in October, is it this year?
Is it this year? Oh my God.
Yeah,
Okay.
We're going to start to see more and more of this happening. And we went for a ride in an autonomous vehicle when we were down in Suffolk recently. No driver. Where's the driver?
Was that no EVEX, Linda Graves EVEX?
Yeah, Linda Graves EVEX event. Yeah. So we got to ride in the future, and there's a lot of questions around autonomous, huge amounts of questions. But I think. And it will take time to mass penetrate the market, but I think that's where you could set a vision of the future.
I mean, if we kind of jump right back to the conversation, the interoperability conversation, that situation, in order for everything to communicate with one another, that is wholly interoperability in itself, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes. Always on connected devices optimized against the needs and movements of humans. Yeah, it feels like there's a massive AI challenge sat behind that as well. And with the evolution of technology, the direction we're going at the moment seems entirely achievable.
I mean, so before we went to move, I was actually trying to, because I knew that Adams, who was kind of moderating our session, I knew he was going to ask me the question about interoperability first. And it was funny because, like we said, everybody's coming from different points of view. But I picked up on a YouTube video out in the States, and I think I might have mentioned this to you before we went to move. And it was literally emergency services that are using interoperability to communicate with each other in situations of danger and emergency and things like that. So if we're looking at interoperability from, kind of moving from what we've just been saying, but back to a whole system of different organisations coming into one central, one central segment, as it were, or system working together, that blew my mind. That actually I hadn't even thought about it, thinking that all of these organisations can just come together to provide that service, and they all know fire brigade, police and ambulance and all this kind of paramedics, whatever they call it out there, all of these having to pull together, and highways and things like that, depending on where it is. And I suppose if we go into the real climate change side of things, we've seen all of the floods that have been happening and things like that, and fires and stuff. We've got to get there, haven't we?
We do, but it's not always easy. I mean, one of the things that a former boss always used to say to me is, all the systems are great. It's fine until you put a soft, squidgy human into it. And as soon as you put the soft, squidgy human into it, they break all the rules because they do things differently. We've got this really interesting balance between the evolution of systems and processes and technology and, human behaviour. And humans don't always do things logically. So
would you say then, is it us humans that are slowing things down when it comes to pulling things together like interoperability? And I'm not just talking about charging here, I'm talking about
every systems. Yeah, I mean, probably yes. Wouldn't the world be a better place if it was all run by robots?
No, I keep thinking of Terminator. Stop it.
So I grew up on the Asimov series on robots. And the semi-utopian vision, and then all the weird stuff that happens around the edges is kind of like you can see it. We're kind of letting AI, tech, and robots sneak into our lives. I have a robot that cleans my floor every day. I was chatting to a lady yesterday about going to visit the Amazon distribution centres. Apparently, you can just sign up for a visit and go and see all the robots whizzing around and moving past them.
I did not know that. Flipping it.
You want to go to a distribution centre? I do. But, the tech, a lot of this tech exists. It's just like hidden in little places. But you can't always get it out because there's regulation and red tape. And, it's there to protect society, quite rightly. But the speed at which we can move that regulation, it has to go to a first sitting in the House of Commons. Then it goes to the House of Lords. And it's like the processes are so slow for the speed at which the technology evolves. There's a real danger that technology is going to jump a step ahead of regulation so fast that regulation just can't keep up. So it's going to be some fun and games to watch as we get more and more technically evolved, and unfortunately humans get in the way and slow things down.
I was going to say, because they're talking about little robots like that, and I don't know how this, I'm assuming this was a pilot. I think in Milton Keynes there were little robots that were taking shopping.
They're still there.
To people. Are they still there?
Still there.
See, I think I might have driven past one when I've gone through Milton Keynes, because it's all a bit like, horizontal, vertical roads, isn't it? Or so I don't know whether it was on a V road or an H road, but I think I kind of drove past one and went, "What the heck is that?"
There's that, but people have adapted to them. There's tech's all out there. It's how do we really make it work? So for me, this is a fascinating little evolution in that space, and the role we play as a business is so small compared to the massive sweep of technology that's coming out there. It's like, well, we just got to keep going. We can't do everything, so let's focus on the bit we can control and try and make sure it ties in with all the future of the other stuff that happens. We've talked a bit in the past about plug and charge. The ability to plug in and charge. That's again a kind of a human issue. We can technically do it, but we need all the humans to agree inside their businesses that they're going to do it, for all of the businesses to sign up to it, to enable it to happen, to get that better consumer experience. So the tech's right there, but as humans, we're slowing down the process. So I think there's a real fascinating dynamic between technology and humans.
It's removing those walled gardens, isn't it? Really, it
is slowly, yeah. But I think that there's a whole journey in here around putting the consumer first, recognizing that technology should be serving the consumer, and trying to drive to the best outcome for those drivers, those businesses, that gives us all the outcome we need.
So I'm going to ask you one final question. Where would you like to see Paua going in the next few years? Your business, all of the stuff that you know, all of the things that you kind of you're interested in, and your ability to be able to kind of be like, your agile ability. Where do you want to be? What's your ultimate aim? It's not world domination, is it?
I think one of the things that we've struggled with is every business we work with wants to do something slightly differently. We've got different classes of driver, different classes of business, and their purpose and their use of the solution we built is very different. So, great case study is we have companies that deliver vehicles from A to B. They're in a different car every day because they're delivering it to someone. So there's a specific use case there. There's another use case where you've got a van fleet, same driver, same van every day, does his rounds, does his work. That's quite a niche specific use set we originally set out to deliver. You've then got use cases where people are just picking up and charging cars as part of their job. They pick a car up, they go charge it, they bring it back. So there's all of these complex use cases. Ultimately, we need to, as an industry, to get to the point where we're selling the electric vehicle vision on the basis, partially, of the potential for cost savings, as well as obviously all the environmental, social benefits, etc., that come from this. But we need to be thinking about how we bring all those cost layers together. And we have this expression that we use internally called the Holy Trinity, which is home, workplace, and public. We need to get all of that data, that management and control of those electrons, into a common platform. And when you start doing that, you can do all the whizzy funky stuff like vehicle to grid trading. You can flex people against supply and demand of the grid. You can optimize your renewables time. You can minimize your price. You can try and nudge consumer behavior to go to cheaper locations. And all that cool stuff starts to make sense, so that ultimately the driver can turn around and go, it costs, I'm slightly making up numbers, it cost me 16 pence a mile to drive my diesel, it cost me 10 pence a mile to drive my electric. And if we can give the fleets and the businesses the ability to have that kind of numerical control over the data and the price they pay, then we're in a place whereby the adoption would just click overnight. As soon as you can start to see those cost savings flowing through into your business, people are going to go, why would I buy a diesel? I'm replacing 20 vehicles, they're just going to be electric because it's cheaper, it makes more sense. But we've got to surface all of that data to those decision makers in a harmonious way before we get too clever with moving stuff around. But let's get all the data in front of the decision makers. Once they got all the data, they can make the decisions a lot faster. And once they can make those decisions, we're going to see the switch happen naturally.
And that in itself is just, it's improvement, isn't it? To make improvements, people need to see cost savings through data, and then they marry up, and then they kind of go, right, okay, I can see that I'm going to save X number of thousands or millions or whatever it is versus what I'm paying now, and then that's when you get that move. I've got one little final question for you, just a little one.
Sort of sneaky one at the end,
because I think I know what the answer might be. What is the thing that you've done recently that's been the most fun in your business?
Technically, maybe not really officially business, but I got to drive the Mercedes eActros truck the other day.
I knew it was going to be that one. I love it.
So this, I mean, people talk about cars and they go, oh, it's got this much horsepower, this much torque. I mean, this thing just blows all of those stats out of the water. This is a powerhouse of a machine. It's got an insane amount of energy stored in the batteries. And the thing that really pleases me the most about having had that experience is we have customers driving those vehicles and charging on our network today. And these are 42-ton articulated vehicles. This was all on a private road with an instructor, by the way, before anyone gets too upset. I don't have a license to drive a truck, but damn well I might be interested in getting one, because the level of comfort, the refinement, the thinking process that's gone into making the in-cab experience, the human behaviour, the emotional piece of it. There's no charging gears around and stuff. It's quiet, it's refined. I can see that drivers will enjoy those vehicles a lot more, and they're skeptical when you speak to them initially, but when you speak to a driver who's got an electric truck, we spoke to one who had to hand it back as he was driving this a big Renault truck, and he had to hand it back because he was switching it to a different depot, and he was pretty upset by it because he didn't want to go back to diesel because the experience is just so much better. So yeah, there's a fascinating little conundrum there, but yeah, that was the thing I've enjoyed most recently.
And the video is actually on social media of Neil driving the e-truck. In fact, I drove go on.
To be clear, the instructor did say, put your foot down.
Did he? You see, So I drove an e-truck last year at EVEX in Suffolk as well, but I didn't get it over 18 miles an hour because I was too scared, but it was amazing. I've never driven anything that big in my life.
No, it's huge.
So we were on the same circuit, but it was just amazing. I'm just going to finish on that note because it's been brilliant talking to you. You know that me and you could talk the hind legs off a donkey anyway, couldn't we?
We could. Yes, and we do from time to time.
And that's very true, absolutely. But listen, Neil, it's been brilliant talking to you. Thank you. I know we've gone across many tangents and many of your opinions and my opinions and everything, but it's been brilliant. So I really, really appreciate your time. So for you guys watching and listening, please do all the wonderful things that I ask you to do every week. Please like, subscribe and share, and check out our LinkedIn Electric Evolution page. And yeah, please kind of keep watching. And to Neil, thank you again.
Thank you for having me twice.
I really appreciate it. Yeah, I know. I should have checked which episode it was before. But to everyone, anyway, get my teeth in. For everybody watching and listening, I'm going to say thank you, and I'll see you next time. Bye. Bye. Thanks for watching Electric Evolution with Liz Allen. If you've enjoyed this episode, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. If you're a charge point operator, local authority or stakeholder in EV charging, I'd love to talk to you about our Charge Point Evolution framework. It's designed to help you create a seamless EV driver journey, boost utilisation and maximise your return on investment. Alternatively, if you know someone who'd be a great podcast guest or might be interested in sponsoring an episode, you can email me on liz@fullcircleci.co.uk. Thanks again for watching.